It over with our panel. We have CNN political commentator Ben Ferguson, a Republican and host of the Ben Ferguson radio show, Wajahat Ali, New York Times contributor and Muslim American playwright, and Brian Stelter, CNN senior media correspondent and host of Reliable Sources. Gentlemen, great to see you. Brian, I'm going to start with you to get your reaction to President Trump's clarification on his Sweden comment that it referred to a story that he watched on Fox News the night before.
This confirms his voracious appetite for cable news, whether it's Fox News, CNN, or other outlets. But this segment on Fox was out of context and I would argue pretty misleading. It suggested, according to this conservative filmmaker, there's been a surge of violence in Sweden. There were scary images broadcast on the screen. It really created this portrait of a country in crisis. Folks in Sweden, journalists, politicians, and others have refuted that idea, say it was exaggerated. So we should consider where the president's getting his information from, his sources of information. His CIA, all these agencies work for him, but he's relying instead on a Fox News segment.
Right. Ben, the president does have access to more information than pretty much anyone else in the United States. Are you concerned that our commander-in-chief made a confusing public comment about another country and cited cable news as his source when he could have just asked for clarification from any number of people within the intelligence community?
I'm not, because I don't think there's anything wrong with President of the United States of America watching the news and making a comment about refugees coming to that country and some of the issues that they're having in Sweden. I also am not surprised that Sweden has tried to downplay this story and this filmmaker, because tourism is a large part of their country, and they want to make it very clear to the world that this is a very safe place. So, again, for the president to look at this, it's not a big deal.
Top officials in Sweden, including the former prime minister, thought he's talking about a terrorist attack the night before in their country, because it was sort of confusing. And now, you know, it's clear that world leaders are watching and listening to what the president of the United States says. Should he be more careful with what he says, and should he find other sources beyond just what he might see, you know, on cable news? Go ahead.
Look, I think there's 2 points here. One, he was making a comment, and maybe he should have clarified that even more so, about the refugee issue there. He was obviously trying to compare and contrast that to what he's trying to do in this country, to vet and have extreme vetting to make sure that we don't make the same mistake that he's implying that Sweden has done. Again, for Sweden to punch back hard, I'm not surprised by that. And the reason why is because they want to protect the image of their country. I get the reasoning why, but it doesn't mean that what the president was implying is somehow not happening there. And that's what this filmmaker was talking about.
Well,
according to the BBC, crime levels are relatively low in Sweden, but I think this gets to a broader pattern of misinformation. I don't want to, lose our minds about one comment about Sweden. Everybody has slips of the tongue, but President Trump in his first 30 days has had a pattern of misleading statements. He also said at the rally that it's no way to vet these thousands of people coming to the U.S. We all know there's a long vetting process. We've all heard about it. I'm sure the president's heard about it too. So I think the issue is when he's saying these things at rallies that might excite the audience but don't hold up, it does create problems, well, I guess all around the world, in this case in Sweden.
And let me just bring you in, Wajahat, because critics, like Ben is insinuating, say that this is really the media making a mountain out of a molehill. Do you agree?
No, never forget Sweden. Never forget the Bowling Green massacre. Never forget the 3 million immigrants who illegally voted for Clinton. All those are examples, by the way, of fake news, alternative facts, and lies, which Kellyanne Conway and Sean Spicer and Donald Trump and other people around him have repeated. And the karmic irony of this is that on that press conference and that rally, he attacked the media. We, Pam, Brian, are the enemies of the American people. Why? For simply reporting facts. And Donald Trump doesn't take his intelligence briefings. He takes his news from some offhand sources. And on the Thursday's press conference, we remember he again said something about his electoral college victory, the largest since Reagan, which was, again, a lie that was brought out by a member of the press, the enemy of the people. And what did he say? Oh, I just heard that from someone. You're the president of the United States of America. Words matter. Tweets matter. Why are you saying fake information? Why can't you take the time to read your intelligence briefings, stop watching Fox News or any other channel, and maybe watch CNN, read the New York Times, which is not the enemy of the people, but does its job in reporting? And also, I think
Hold on 1 second, though. Let's be clear about something you just said. You've said it twice, and if we want to talk about fake news, are you implying that the president is not taking any of his intelligence briefings? Because you just implied it twice which is not accurate if you're all about being accurate, or is that just a cheap shot at the President of the United States of America?
I think there's leaks that are happening in D.C., and as we all know, that apparently he does not sit there and read his intelligence briefings. He himself, remember, praised the fact that he's a very smart person. I'm not saying that he doesn't.
After?
Ben,
are you talking, again,
Ben, nice try. Ben, nice try to pivot.
Let me just jump in
it's a nice try to pivot.
It's not fair to paint with a broad brush that he's not reading any of his.
No one's saying that he's that.
Okay.
No one's saying that. But I'm saying I'm recommending. I'm recommending that he spends more time. He spends more time, Ben.
Hold on. It's what you just said there. It's the perfect example of exactly why Donald Trump attacks people just like you, because you just implied to the American people watching right now that Donald Trump is not sitting down for his intelligence briefings or not reading them, which is not true. You cannot back that up, but you say it twice.
I'm not saying that.
And look,
Ben,
let me just jump in here.
Nice
We don't know how his consumption of cable news stacks up to, how much time he's spending on the intelligence briefs and with officials. But let me just pose this to you, Ben, because it was just yesterday. It was just yesterday that the president tweeted out that the media as a whole is the enemy of the American people.
Right.
And that the media is fake news, and yet then he goes on to his rally and cites something that he watched in the media, and then caused alarm, of course, in another country, as we know. I mean, how does that square?
Well, I think you should have added the word some in there. And I think it's pretty clear that there are some people in the media that are their job now is to attack the President of the United States of America and to undermine him at any way they can and to make him look bad. If you've watched some of the coverage, it's abundantly clear. There are some reporters out there who are going to make their MO as the guy or the gal that attacked the President of the United States of America. Now, I don't think everybody in the media is doing that. And sometimes the media is right and sometimes Donald Trump is wrong. And when he's wrong, I've also been very clear about that. The Electoral College is a perfect example of that. But there are many people in the media now that when they wake up in the morning, they go to work or to the White House to report, it is to attack the President of the United States of America. And I think that was his point. And there's a lot of Americans
Brian, is that fair?
Oh, I was asking who. I wish there were specific examples that you could cite, Ben.
Well, I think if you look at the demeanor of some of the people that have been in the press briefing room, and just the connotation, the way that they attack and the way that they write and the way that they report the news, it is very clear that they have a major disdain for the President of the United States of America. And you've not seen this when it was towards Barack Obama, for example.
Ben,
just the people that are whining and complaining that they're not being called on, for example, because
respectfully, Ben, as a patriot, aren't you offended that Donald J. Trump is calling the press, the fourth estate, the enemy of the American people for simply doing reporting? He said the Russia story, fake news. Really? Is Russia fake news? We're simply doing our job, and he's saying we're the enemy of the American people. As a patriot, I want you to stand up for the Fourth Estate and for the First Amendment.
Here's what I'll say as a patriot. I am a guy who gives my opinion for a living. I know that I'm not a, quote, genuine, true journalist. But when journalists do the same thing that I do for a living, which is give their commentary and their opinion and act as if somehow they're non-biased, it's pretty pathetic. And there are some people in the media that act as if somehow they're non-biased when in fact they're not. I am biased.
Who specifically, Ben? You said people in the... I mean, as Brian asked, I mean, if you're going to make an allegation like that, what are you talking about? Who exactly are you talking about?
Well, I'll give you a generic example. You look at how many reporters have complained or have done those little subtle one-liners about how they're not being called on at the White House and how he's going to, quote, non-traditional journalists. This happened last week. Multiple people were saying this, and they were saying, well, we've been passed over. Or we haven't been.
I know what day you're talking about. It was the day where go ahead, Brian. And then we have to
they were pointing out the press strategy, right, which was the call on more conservative outlets. Trump can call on whoever he wants, but the biggest news outlets in America,
and then the next day he did call on CNN and others, but go ahead.
And NBCs and CBSs, those are the ones being called the enemies of the American people. He's singling out 5 of us: CNN, New York Times, ABC, NBC, and CBS. He's trying to drive a wedge between those outlets and other outlets. And by the way, I don't think it'll work.
All right, Brian Stelter, Ben Ferguson, Wajahat Ali. I got to jump in and wrap it up there, unfortunately, because that was a very good, lively, important discussion to have. Ben. Thank you, gentlemen. Do appreciate it. And coming up on this Sunday, marching with a message, hundreds take to the streets of Times Square to protest the president's travel ban. And right at the front of the pack, my next guest. Hip-hop mogul Russell Simmons, he joins me live on why this event is so important to him and what he'd like to tell